Welcome to the Catholic Community Scripture Study, held at St. John the Evangelist Catholic Church in Jackson, Michigan. I will be your host, Todd Gale, as we walk our way through the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Now we're in the second section of Matthew, which is divided into 5 books. We're in the second part, a series of 10 healings before he goes into another discourse. Initially, remember, this is linked to Moses, who had 10 miracles of the plagues. So now Jesus has 10 miracles of healing and other miracles as well. Something I forgot to point out last time with the leper, Jesus is the new covenant priest, right? So he is far greater than the old covenant and the old covenant priests, yet he respects their authority. He doesn't do away with that old law, at least not yet. So what Jesus does is he sends the leper back to the priest, right? He doesn't do away with that law. Now there's this great scene with the centurion's servant in chapter 8, verse 5. And Jesus comes, he's in Capernaum, and he comes to a centurion, and the centurion pleads with him, saying, Lord, lying at home is my servant, and he's really, really ill, right? So let's take a look at those. That's that whole section is verse 5, at least right now. I'll just read 5 through 9. And the centurion talks about authority. Now, this takes place in Capernaum. Remember, this is where Jesus is now headquartered. This is in Peter's home in the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. This is where Matthew is a tax collector. All of this happens in Capernaum. Now, this is a centurion. So he's a Roman military man. That means he's a Gentile, right? He's a Gentile Roman centurion. He has a century under him. That means 100 men are under him. So he commands 100 men. 60 centuries make up a legion, which is 6,000 troops in the Roman army. So this man has authority over 100. Obviously, he's a Gentile. So how does he know Jesus or what Jesus could do? Like the leper, he comes to Jesus and he's seeking some help and some assistance and some healing. Like the leper, he seems to know something about Jesus, something that other people do not yet see, and he takes the step forward. Now, most every Jew under Roman occupation would find a reason to not like a centurion, right? They would not like these military men. Yet, it looks like this particular centurion may have been a Gentile God-fearer. Do you remember who the God-fearers are? Those are the Gentiles who believed in the one God. They believed in Yahweh, but they hadn't fully entered the covenant. They didn't become a Jew. They didn't celebrate all of the different rites, but they believed, and they would go to the temple, to the court of the Gentiles, and they were allowed to pray, and they could sometimes come to synagogue. Now, this same story appears in Luke chapter 7, where it says that this particular centurion helped to build the synagogue for them. So, since he was not a fully initiated Jew, though, he still was considered ritually unclean, just like all the other Gentiles. Notice how he handles this. This man is really, really nice. What a great character. And it's interesting, whenever the New Testament talks about a centurion, talks about a centurion that's interacting with the people of God, there are at least 7 times throughout the New Testament. Every time it presents them as honorable, very good men. That's very interesting. Now, he came not for a selfish reason, he came for his servant. And the word for servant actually is kind of unusual. It's sort of a vague term. It could mean a child or a servant or a slave or even the child of a slave. And he pleads with Jesus. This shows that he's not making just a casual request. And Jesus' response is also, it's a little bit vague and ambiguous in the Greek. It can read both, I will come, or it can be a question, shall I come? Either way he says it, Jesus is making sort of an offer to enter the house of a Gentile's home. Jesus will be breaking a very huge part of the Jewish law. He doesn't need to be separated from Gentiles because of holiness. He is holiness. He fulfills the law of holiness. So he says, whether he says, I will come or shall I come, either way, he's making the offer to the centurion. And the centurion then offers those famous words that we say at Mass. Lord, I am not worthy to have you enter under my roof. Notice this Gentile Roman centurion also calls Jesus Lord, like the leper. He seems to know something. And this Gentile Roman centurion knew the law. He knew the Jewish law. And he knows a good Jew would never enter a Gentile home, that he would make him impure, not worthy of worship. So this Gentile Roman centurion, he also knew Jesus was different. He was no regular rabbi. He deserved special honor. And I believe that this centurion is being very sensitive, very culturally sensitive to Jesus. I don't want to put you in an awkward situation with your fellow Jews, right? I'm not worthy that you should enter into my house. No, you don't need to do that. Just say the word. Right? He's really sensitive to Jesus. One of the commentaries I read said his consideration of Jesus in this situation was impressive. In his concern for both his servant and for Jesus, he was an other-centered person, a very good man. Well, the Gentile Roman centurion also had faith in the authority of Jesus. And whereas the leper needed touch, the centurion saw that Jesus could heal through the authority of his word. Just say the word. Oh, if only the Pharisees and the scribes and the high priests had this kind of faith, right? And he says, I'm a man under authority. He understands the military chain of command. He understands that if a soldier disobeys, he's not just disobeying the centurion, he's disobeying Caesar. And he understands the chain of command with Jesus. He seems to understand Jesus is connected directly with God. Whether he knows Jesus is God or not, it would be very unlikely, but maybe he does. But whatever it is, he knows Jesus is connected to God. He has an amazing authority, and the centurion sees it. And that famous line that we repeat at Mass, Lord, I'm not worthy, we personalize it, okay? We don't say, only say the word and my servant will be healed. We say, my soul will be healed. At every Mass, ask the Lord, Lord, what is the word today? What is the word I need to hear right now so that I'm healed? I've been doing that for years. And typically what he says to me is usually patience or surrender. That's kind of the common theme. But isn't it amazing that the words of a Roman Gentile centurion makes it into the Roman Catholic Mass? Him in his situation every time you come to that. And in the next verses, Jesus says, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even among Israel. And he marvels, says he marvels at this man's faith. And he says, many will come from the east and the west, and they're going to sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. They're going to sit down with the father of the Jews. But there are Jews who will have weeping and gnashing of teeth because they will not make it to that table. And then Jesus says, let it be done for you as you believe. and his servant was just immediately healed. This miracle shows that Jesus can heal from afar. He doesn't have to be physically present. He doesn't have to put his physical hands on us. And that's really good news for us because he's not physically present bodily in the world today as he was then. Does Jesus marvel at your faith? Can you imagine what it would be to make the God of the universe marvel at us? This Gentile Roman centurion got Jesus' attention, and Jesus was surprised, joyfully surprised. He marveled. And then he says, this is the kind of faith that can save us. Saving faith is faith in Jesus Christ. This would have totally shocked the disciples and anyone who heard. And who is standing right next to Jesus at this point? His own disciples, most likely. They are Jewish. They think they will be seated at the table with Abraham. And Jesus says, I find more faith in this Roman centurion than I have in anyone else. Ouch. That has to sting, right? Jesus makes a huge announcement with this setup. He says that this Roman Gentile centurion is not the only Gentile that's going to follow him, that's going to be seated at the table with the Jews. They'll even sit at the table with the fathers of the faith, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This was a radical idea to the Jewish people in this day. When you put all this together with what Jesus has been saying, many will say, Lord, Lord, but they're not going to make it into heaven. Jesus says, away from me, I don't even know you. But here he's saying that the Jews that think they're in, that call out to Yahweh the Lord, they think they're automatically in because of their culture, because of their race, because of who they were born to. But the sons of the kingdom may be cast out into hell because they don't know him. This is radical. This is unbelievable. Jesus is formulating a message that what matters most is faith and belief in him, obedience and trust in the Father. And that goes way beyond racial identity and way beyond religious identity. This is a tsunami of new thought for the Jews. It's radical, it's shocking. And then he even says there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth among the people who think they're in. That appears to be, that's kind of a common slang among the Jews of that day. It's kind of a, like we have different little phrases that we say. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. It doesn't just mean like I'm a little bit sad. It's deep sorrow and suffering. Gnashing of teeth can be rage and anger, despair. Gritting your teeth and just being so filled with anger. It says, may it be done as you believe. Oh man. How would this work with us? Do we really have enough faith to really expect results? Do we really want his word to heal us as we believe? That's something to really think about. Notice a little running theme here with the Christian journey. We have our trespasses forgiven as we forgive others. We will be judged as we judge others. We will have fruitfulness in prayer as we believe. There's a cooperation with God. He doesn't just do good things to us. There's an expectation that we're going to work alongside him. And then in verses 14 and 15, Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law. I will not make any jokes as to the mother-in-law. But when Jesus enters into Peter's house, he sees his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. He touches her hand, and she's immediately healed, and she jumps up and serves them. He saw his mother lying sick. Clearly, this shows Peter was married. And most likely, most of the apostles probably were married men. And the fever that she had was probably one of three. According to the professionals, at that time it could have been malaria, some form of typhoid fever, or Malta fever, which multi-fever caused anemia. The red blood cells of the body would kind of stop producing, and then it would stop carrying all the nutrients and the oxygen to the body, and slowly, the body wastes away. All three of these are terribly bad. The first healing with the leper was public, and it was up close, and he was a Jew. The second healing with the Gentile Roman Centurion was discussed publicly, but he was healed from a distance, and this was a Gentile. Now the third healing is in a private home. It's not in public, and Jesus reaches out and touches the hand, and it's pretty sure that his mother-in-law is a Jew. He touches her hand, someone whose touch, right, is just so effective. In one hand, he touches someone who's forbidden, and then he heals from a word from a distance, and now he heals with a tender touch. She immediately rose from her bed and waited on them. She served them, is what some translations say. Maybe she got Jesus something to eat. That's what it kind of sounds like. It's a very Jewish motherly thing. You just pop up and you're very hospitable. Jesus healed the woman with a gentle touch. Her sickness was less severe, and she acts like a great disciple. She rises and serves the way we all should. Matthew uses this term rose or arose 20 times in his gospel, sort of like a resurrection theme. Now, it's really kind of funny that she jumps right up and starts serving them. That's I think it's meant to be sort of humorous. The word for serve is diakonie. It's a word that when it's a noun, it means a deacon, one who serves under the apostles. So in a sense, she's sort of a role model for the deacons who were first appointed in Acts to serve at the table and distribute food on behalf of the apostles, right? She was sort of a deacon in her mission. I think that's very startling. That's very strong. And then when evening comes, they brought to him many who were demon possessed. I never caught this before, but it appears like this happens in Peter's house. They brought the people to him, and that's where he was. And he cast out spirits, and he healed many. And Matthew ties this to the words of Isaiah in the suffering servant. He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Now, many were demon possessed. I think we talked about this before. There's a lot of thoughts about why there was so much demonic activity in that time. We don't really know for sure if it's more or less. We do know that Josephus, the historian, says there was never a nation under heaven more wicked than the Romans. They were very evil people. And also the Romans were very superstitious. Very much they were into occult practices and calling forth the different gods who could have been evil spirits of different kind. There was an open invitation, an open door to demons. So maybe this was a time when there was lots of demonic activity. And this was all written, Matthew says, in order to fulfill what was spoken by Isaiah. I don't want to take the time to go through all of this, but if you get a chance, look at Isaiah chapter 53. This is one of the famous suffering servant chapters of Isaiah. And Isaiah 53 talks about just beautiful prophecies foreseeing Jesus. And the whole point of it is that what God is going to do through this suffering servant, through this Messiah, is he's going to heal us. He's going to forgive sins. He's going to gather the lost sheep, but it's going to cost him. He's going to be stricken. He's going to take on our grief. He's going to have all the iniquity of the world laid upon him. This is a profound chapter. It's Isaiah chapter 53. So if you get a chance, I would really recommend go take a peek at that. And I just don't understand how our Jewish friends miss this. Who else could this be talking about? Who else could Isaiah mean other than some sort of Messiah figure who stands in the place of God and performs miraculous healings? The healing work of the Savior cost Jesus something. He didn't just have a bag of Tinkerbell dust that he throws on people. It cost him his life. And that's super important to see. And when Jesus saw great multitudes gathering in verse 18, he commanded them, he gave a command to depart to the other side. So he's going to kind of take off. There's a few too many people. And a scribe comes up and he says, "Teacher, I'll follow you wherever you go." And Jesus says, "Well, that's great, but foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man is no place to lay his head." Now, some scholars think this little section is an odd place to plop this story down. Right in the middle of all this healing, he starts talking about a scribe and a disciple. But other scholars say, no, this is right where it's supposed to be. It's in a section of miracles. What could be more miraculous than a scribe willing to follow Jesus? One of these guys that writes lots of extra laws for the Jews, one of the rule keepers, one of the professionals that also works with Gentiles and pagans, as like a legal scribe. The odds of them asking to follow Jesus, that is amazing. When Jesus saw a multitude about him, this is a really big deal. The crowds are growing in size. He didn't follow the crowds. He didn't try to make the crowds bigger. But what I want you to see, this is a very big deal in the Gospels. Jesus does not do his ministry in secret. There are multitudes, at times thousands of people who witness him. This is not done in a vacuum. So after the resurrection, when word starts to spread about Jesus rising from the dead, there are literally thousands of eyewitnesses that can share what they saw. And those that became believers, they helped to protect the gospel story by saying, yes, I saw that. I saw that with my own eyes. This is true. Now, this scribe says he would follow Jesus wherever he goes. With all the miracles that Jesus had been performing, maybe this guy thought, hey, this is really cool. This is a glamorous lifestyle. This is a glamorous rabbi. I want to follow him. And when Jesus says foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, right? He's telling the man, he's not saying no, but he's telling the man it's going to be difficult. He's not painting a perfect picture of what it's going to be like. And we can kind of read between the lines here and guess that this scribe was, like most scribes, pretty worldly, pretty tied to the Sadducees and to King Herod. Because what Jesus says, we would never get this in English, we would never know this without a commentary. King Herod Antipas was known as the fox, and his father, King Herod the Great, was known as the eagle, a bird of the air. So it might very well be that Jesus is saying Herod and the Sadducees and the scribes, they have comfort and ease. They have palaces. They have a place to lay their head. But if you follow me, it's not going to be as easy. Many homes, like Peter's home, were available to Jesus. He probably stayed at Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house for quite a few times. He probably went back home to Mom's house in Nazareth. But he no longer has a permanent home. And once they start traveling south into Jerusalem, it's going to be a camping trip the whole way down. Now then Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. He uses this 81 times in the gospel. Every time it's either something that Jesus says of himself or something that's being quoted. Because Jesus uses this term the most for him. It's his term. It's an important phrase used to describe himself. It's used as a title that reflects both the glory and divinity of Jesus and the humility and humanity of Jesus, of the Messiah. It's a very mysterious term. It's human in the fact of Son of Man means son of Adam, like descended from Adam, human, Son of Man. So he's part of the family of man, but it's also divine. Like the prophet Daniel, who in the book of Daniel, he foresees one like the Son of Man coming down from the heavens, giving authority over the earth. So it's a mysterious term that means both power and glory of God and also humble humanity. And the Jews totally understood that that title was going to be for the Messiah. So when Jesus claims this for himself, he's saying, I am the Messiah, right? The interesting thing is we never hear from this scribe again. What becomes of him, we really don't know. Then another of the disciples says to him, Lord, let me first go bury my father, and then I'll follow you. And Jesus says, no, follow me now, and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Wow, this sounds a little rough. Jesus, have a little sympathy with the guy. His dad is dead, right? Well, this man is another one of his disciples. So it's not one of the 12 disciples. It shows there were other disciples. And we know later there's 70 or 72 disciples. And other times it mentions many other disciples besides the 12. But some scholars agree that this man is not asking permission to dig a grave. Wait 20 minutes while I go dig a grave because my father just died. Probably the man is caring for his gravely ill father who's not dead yet. And the man wants to remain in his father's house and care for him until the father died. That's actually a good thing. It's very noble. It's honoring. But and it follows Jewish law too. But waiting for that old man to pass away might drag on and on. Not be soon. And Jesus is saying what he needs to do is happening now. The disciple wants to follow Jesus, but not yet. He knew it was good. He knew he should do it. But Jesus is saying the call to discipleship is greater, and it's immediate. I only have 2.5 more years of my mission. I don't have much time. If you're following me as a disciple that's going to become one of the apostles, this has to be the priority in your life. And some scholars think the man is really talking about he wants to wait for his father to die so that he can get the inheritance. So he would have the money, could bring the money along to make the mission a little easier. And Jesus says, no. Follow me. Let the dead bury their own dead. It probably means, I know that sounds really harsh, it probably means something like the spiritually alive need to be with me. Let the spiritually dead take care of the physical dead. This world is dead. Come with me to the living. It's kind of like all those worldly things that need to be done. Let somebody who's not spiritually alive, at least not as much alive, let somebody who that's their call, let them do that. But if you're an apostle of Christ, if you're going to be a follower, a disciple, that needs to be your number one priority, right? Come and live life with the King. Follow me. So Jesus presses this man to follow him. And clearly what he's saying is nothing is more important. Jesus must come first, right? So Jesus is not afraid to discourage this potential disciple. That's really important to see. He's probably using a little bit of hyperbole to shock his disciples and show that this mission is urgent. This mission is not going to be comfortable. And to show how uncomfortable it is, we go now to a storm where Jesus has power over the waves. The disciples follow. There's a tempest that arises in the sea. The boat is covered with waves. It probably means the waves are so high on one side and the other. The boat's down in a gully between the waves, and it can't even be seen, right? And during all this, Jesus is sleeping, and his disciples are panicking, and they wake him up. Lord, save us. Now, when he got into the boat, remember that village of Capernaum is right on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus was healing these folks, and then he tried to move away from the crowd. and he talks to these other wannabe disciples. Now he gets into this boat, and like many Galileans, right, he's familiar with this lake. Remember, Jesus has fishermen with him who fish on this lake. They know very, very well what happens here. The lake is down in a very low bowl. It's a very low space of land. In fact, the leading into the Sea of Galilee, it's one of the lowest places on earth. It's very, very low. And so around each side of the lake, there are these huge mountains and hills and crevices, and cold air will rush down, and it kind of goes into the bowl, and it comes from all directions, and it whips up terrible wind. Several eyewitnesses who live there today say in a matter of 20 minutes it will go from a clear blue sky to a raging storm. It happens very quickly. Remember, some of these disciples are fishermen on the lake. They're experienced. They know this lake. And yet they cry out, Lord, this does not appear to be a normal storm. It may be demonic. It could be from Satan. The cause of the huge waves is not normal. The word in Greek it's a seismos megas. You know what mega means, right? Like huge, giant, great. Seismos, where we get the word seismograph, right, measures what? An earthquake. It's an earthquake great is what that means. A great earthquake in the water, an earthquake of greatness on the sea. They have no other way of explaining how incredibly violent this storm was. But Jesus was asleep. Come on now, was he really asleep? Was he testing them? Did he have one eye open, just looking to see what's going on? Is he laughing behind his pillow? It's very interesting. The grammar and the words used in this, they're kind of violent with the seismos, megas, and the different words around that are just strong, harsh words. But then when it says Jesus was asleep, it's very soft language. Oh, but Jesus was asleep. You know, the dramatic contrast between them. I don't know about you, but I'm impressed by the fact that he needed sleep, and so he slept through a roller coaster. I mean, that's just amazing. I must have Messiah level ability to sleep because I can sleep through anything. But the point was his inner thoughts and his heart were peaceful. He was trusting in the care of his Father, even in the midst of this seismos megas. Jesus had no worry and no anxiety. He says to the apostles, "Why are you fearful? You have little faith." And he rebukes the wind and the sea, and it immediately calms, and the men marvel. Notice that word marvel again. Who can this be that even the winds and the sea obey him? Remember earlier the faith of the Roman Gentile Centurion? He was very impressive. Jesus marveled at his faith, right? Contrast that here with his own disciples, where he disappointedly says, you don't have any faith. You have little faith. He gets up and he rebukes the wind and the sea. He spoke to the wind and it obeyed and answered. Who has the power to speak to the wind and the sea so that it answers? Who has authority over the wind and the sea? Only the one who made the wind and the sea, God. And the rebuke is the same term that's used when Jesus rebukes an evil spirit, or when he tells Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," right? That's the rebuke. The men that see this, the disciples, marvel at Jesus, just like Jesus marveled at the centurion's faith. This is a chapter where people are shocked and surprised and stunned. Sometimes it's Jesus, sometimes it's others. The Ignatius Study Bible has some great comments about how this New Testament miracle of Jesus links to the Old Testament story of Jonah, the prophet. I'll let you read that on your own in the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. This miracle proves that Jesus is more than a man with the gift of healing, right? In a span of just a few moments, the disciples saw the complete humanity of Jesus in his tired sleep and the fullness of his deity in calming a storm. They saw Jesus for who he truly is, both truly man and truly God. He is truly the Son of Man. Amen. So we'll pick up next time with more great healings, and we'll enter into chapter 9. How very exciting is this? We'll see you all very soon. Thank you so much for walking the way through the Gospel of Matthew.